Hello, Mike.
Hello, Julian.
So, what are we doing tonight?
We're going to meet a man called Spider.
Oh, we're going to deep delve into drugs. We're going to find the right drugs for the right bugs.
Let's get our guests in, because tonight we've got, from the Bella Moss Foundation, Jill Moss.
And Chris Laurence.
Hi, I'm Mike Brampton.
And my name is Julian Hoad.
Welcome to Veterinary Ramblings.
Jill, Chris, hi. Hello, how are you?
Hello.
Good, thank you.
Excellent. It's great to have you on tonight. Absolutely brilliant.
Jill, you're the founder of the Bella Moss Foundation. And Chris, you are now working in what capacity for the Bella Moss Foundation?
I'm the treasurer.
The treasurer. You have been, before that, in many incarnations, involved with the Animal Welfare Federation?
Foundation,
sorry, and the RSPCA.
Yeah, still am. AWF is BVA's charity.
That's the British Veterinary Association, isn't it?
Yeah. And I'm a trustee of the RSPCA local branch and chair of their Southwest Regional Board.
Oh,
right.
The RSPCA, for our American listeners, is the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals.
Jill, I think we should get on with the nitty-gritty stuff. And I think we're all bursting to know Annie.
You don't want me to break into song now, do you?
I do.
Yeah.
The sun will come out tomorrow. So you go, no, we won't do that. That will frighten all your listeners off. Annie was one of the shows I did as a child actress. Whilst I was Annie, I was dating the young boy that was Oliver.
Oh,
now, was that Mark Lester? Or
No, not in the film, in the show in the West End.
No.
I can't remember his name.
No, I remember his. I do remember it. I've forgotten it momentarily. I do remember because I was offered that role as well.
Really?
So there we go. In another incarnation, you may have been dating me.
Goodness me.
So you've also appeared in all sorts of things then, haven't you? Like
all sorts of things.
The Sound of Music?
Sound of Music. I was a child actress, so much of the work that I did was between the age of 12 and 16.
Right.
And then I looked very young at 16. So what people would do was employ me because it saved them having to pay for chaperones for children that really were young. And I could take many of the parts then of playing younger parts. And I did that till I was about 20, 21, really.
Wow. It's a brutal world then, isn't it? You were putting a lot of younger children out of work.
I was.
Yeah.
I was 25 playing 12. Yeah, but it was very good at that point. But I think that there comes a point in every artist's life where you have to question, as a child, it doesn't matter. But as an adult, how many auditions do I really want to be going for? And do I want to spend my whole life being rejected?
Yes. And having the uncertainty of working or not working.
Yeah, that's right. I think I was fortunate that I was busy as a child actor at the right time. And I did things like Grange Hill, Tucker's Luck. You know, I did a lot of things where children, as an actor, it's a great opportunity because you get to learn the older actors that you're working with.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And of course, some of them are now the older actors themselves, aren't they?
Yes, a lot of them are, and I think that people are still working. I had the greatest pleasure to work with people like Judi Dench, and she was so kind to me, and Glenda Jackson, and I learned more from working with them than I ever did at drama school. Yeah,
you're actually putting that theory a bit into practice, aren't you? And
so Chris, your acting background. Now, what did you star in as a child?
I did the lights because I was absolutely rubbish as an actor. So I did the stage lights. I was known at school as Spider because I'd climb up in the bits at the top, dangling the lights. And
your childhood nickname was Spider then?
Yeah.
There are worse nicknames to have.
I was long and gangly.
What a cool nickname. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, that's great.
Chris. So is that where you first realised you wanted to become a vet?
No, before that, actually, I started when I must have been about 10 or 11, I suppose. We lived in rural Sussex. We had a goat. A goat, being the goat, ate something it shouldn't. And the vet came along and did this, that, and the other to Tansy the goat.
Yes.
And she got better. I thought, that's a nice job. I'll do that. Went to the careers master and said, I want to be a vet. And they said, no, he's so stupid. He'll never make the grade.
And was that a red rag to the bulls?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I scraped into vet school and scraped through vet school and came out the other end, and I've survived all the way since.
and survived a tremendously good career.
Well, I've had a great time because I changed in the middle, and I think I'd spent 30 years in practice, and I'd had enough of practice. I wanted to do anything except be in practice, frankly, by that stage. And so I went to work for the RSPCA as their assistant chief vet, and Jim Phillips, who was the chief vet then, sadly died of cancer 6 months later. And so I got parachuted in, and it just rejuvenated me. I went from being, oh God, I've got to go to work today, to, oh good, I've got to go to work today. And because I was living away from home while I was working both there and Dogs Trust, living away from home during the week, it meant I'd work long days, and I never minded going and doing something in the evening because it was that or watch television, and which is the better option.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Unless there's a reviewing of Annie or Oliver, there's nothing to see, is there? So
absolutely. Well, I retuned my television last night, and there are 100 television channels. Who watches
100?
that? Yeah.
Well, I haven't actually got a television.
Really?
I am that person in Sussex. We are that family. We have a computer, and so we stream things when we want to, but otherwise it gets folded up and stuck away in the cupboard, and we talk.
Yep.
Or
That's
play
lovely.
jigsaw puzzle. Yeah.
That's really good. That's really nice.
Yeah, television's great for the news, and the odd programs, the sort of David Attenborough's and Country File and those sort of things. But I can't be bothered. I'd rather read a book. Reading Barack Obama at the moment is far more educational.
Oh, yeah. or you could listen to a podcast, of course, because there's some very good
of
ones.
course.
Good ones around.
There are some very good ones, and there's one in particular that springs to my mind, which goes out across on Spotify, iTunes, and also available on YouTube and Facebook, called Veterinary Ramblings.
Yes, I think actually, Chris, you've got a point there. There's not very much of interest on television, but there is so much you can learn by podcasts and webinars on the internet. And I'd much rather be educated. I think entertaining for an hour or two maybe, but not all the time. It gets a little bit repetitive on the TV. And in the days when I was working in television, it was the good old days where if they showed the program you were in, you got paid again. But that doesn't happen anymore.
No, really? No royalties anymore?
No. No. There's things like buyout. So the last audition I went for a commercial, usually you do a commercial and then you'd be paid every time the commercial was shown. And they say, do you want this job? Yes. In that case, sign this piece of paper, and that's a one-off deal.
Wow. It's a bit harsh.
Very harsh, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I remember my sister and I auditioned for Cadbury's Chocolate Animals as an advert. My sister got the part and I didn't. But
that was when you wanted to become a vet, wasn't it?
That's when I wanted to become a vet, absolutely. I thought, look at these chocolate animals, they're so lifelike. Other chocolate animals are available, but clearly not as good. But the problem I have at the moment with television and with live media like that is the media bias, and we're seeing it hugely with everything, but particularly with all things medical. Particularly, I'm not going to mention the pandemic because we mention that pretty much every other week. But the one thing that we hear all the time is how bad vets and doctors are with things like antibiotic use, and that's actually not biased, is it, Jill? That's correct. I think vets and doctors.
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say it's correct that everybody's not good with it, but one of the things that I find by talking to the general public, and it's interesting this, people will call me and say, my dog's got an eye infection. I don't really want to spend the money going to the vet, but there's something in my cupboard my doctor gave me about a year ago. Do you think I can use that? I think it's the lack of understanding about the use of antibiotics as far as some of the general public goes. But I think we've worked really hard, Chris, haven't we, over the years? And I think the veterinary profession have really taken this on board. But what's really important is that if the vets are being prudent about the use, you need the owners to be on board as well and not demand an antibiotic when it's not necessary. So a lot of the work we do is encouraging that kind of compliance, really.
Can we just ask you how it all started? We've sort of hopped into the middle here, right?
Oh, my goodness.
Mentioned you had a vested interest. So can you tell us a bit about the Bella Boss Foundation?
You want the long version or the short version?
Whichever you prefer.
It started because I had a beautiful dog called Bella, and she was my soulmate. You know, a single woman who's not married, doesn't have children. You tend to have a slightly different relationship with your pets than maybe if you've got lots of kids and the dog's just in the background. So she was really very important to me, and she contracted an MRSA infection during cruciate ligament surgery after chasing a squirrel. Now, what I found out later was that it, unfortunately, more than likely, and I won't say any more, came from the post-operative procedure or the operation or post-operatively. And it was very difficult because at the time, the vets didn't know anything about it. Neither did I, for that matter. I wasn't looking for an MRSA infection. The wound wasn't healing. They were treating her in all sorts of ways, but not at the time wearing gloves or masks. And I didn't know anything about it. But she became very ill and it became systemic. And I took her to Davis specialists who were wonderful. And I can't tell you how wonderful they were. And what they said to me was, you know, this could have been prevented. And if we got her earlier, it could have been treated. Unfortunately, given her age and an underlying condition, there's not much more we can do now. They probably did give her about 3 weeks longer than she could have had. So she came home with a view to reconstructing the leg should she get better. But unfortunately, she took a turn for the worse, and I had to go back to my local vets at the time. And this was the problem. The nurse on duty had a child who was very ill and was terrified of coming into contact with the infection. And she was on duty alone at the veterinary practice. I didn't know what to do, but I had a friend who was a vet that I brought in, and they let me stay with Bella for a couple of nights, but locked in the consult room. I could only go to the toilet and back to the consult room. Well, Bella became very ill. She had pulmonary edema and she was going into organ failure. So the vet that was on holiday at the time, I called him and he said he'd come back. And unfortunately, by the time he got back, it was too late. And I lost her, and I lost her to something that could have been prevented with better hygiene and with early detection. But that wasn't just that. I had a cut in my foot at the time, and because I was in the consult room with her walking around, it was summer, I was walking around in bare feet, I didn't know any different. A bacteria had got into my system, and a month later I visited my GP with pus coming out of my foot. This was after Bella died. And I was really ill. And the GP went out the room and came back in wearing an apron, gown and a mask. And I said, oh, my goodness, I've got MRSA, haven't I? He said, looks like it, yeah, but we'll take some cultures to be sure. And it came back as the same strain that Bella had, because the bacteriology reports proved that. So I didn't know what to do. I thought, you know, I researched MRSA in pets. Is there such a thing? This was a human strain. How did it come about? I phoned up people like Professor David Lloyd at the Royal Veterinary College. I phoned Dr. Tim Nuttall, and I spoke to a lot of people. And I said, I don't understand how this has happened. At the same time, Claire Rayner was retiring from working to improve infection control in human healthcare. We met up and she became the patron of a little website that I started called Pets and MRSA. But she became quite, unwell and couldn't really continue. So I was at Crofts one day, walking around with my Pets MRSA leaflet, wondering what to do about this thing that I'd found out about that I thought people should know about. And I bumped into someone called Mr. Chris Laurence.
Mm-hmm.
We got chatting, and I'd done a lot of media interviews at the time. I'd been talking about my story in the television and the radio and the papers. And I got the attention of a lot of people, but I wasn't really doing anything productive. And Chris sat me down Well, you can say what you said, really, Chris, if you can remember. It's going back about.
I can vividly. It was essentially it was don't be negative, be positive. Don't go around blaming vets and the system. Tell people what to do so that it doesn't happen. Do the education, talk to vets, talk about antimicrobial resistance, hygiene, all of those other things. Make yourself into an education charity, not a charity that's just trying to go out and slag people off because they're all not doing it right. Mm-hmm. That's where it went, really.
And I think I said, "Can you help me?"
Yeah, probably. I have this congenital inability to say no when somebody says that. Absolutely useless.
Well, I'll ask you a question about that later then, Chris, because times are quite tight, with COVID and all that sort of stuff.
Some things I can say no to, Mike.
But what came from a tragic experience for me was the catalyst to start something positive like the Bella Moss Foundation. Right. And Bella Moss Foundation wouldn't exist today had it not have been for my meeting with Chris and the way that we approached the whole topic and started to collaborate with government agencies, with other, with veterinary institutes and people teaching like the RVC and all the other veterinary schools, and bringing on people that give up their time, I've got to say, freely to help us. And our clinical board of advisors all give up their time freely, and everybody that helps us, nobody gets paid. So without that kind of support and collaboration, the charity really wouldn't exist.
It's an amazing story. And firstly, obviously, sorry to hear about Bella. It's still awful feeling that this was a problem that in different circumstances could have been firstly avoided and secondly picked up and treated.
Yes, he could have been treated, but unfortunately at the time, we're talking about 2004, very little was known about MRSA or any other resistant bacteria spreading between humans and animals. The veterinary profession they didn't have it on their radar. Pet owners and general public didn't know anything about it. So in a way, what I tried to do was take her memory and build it into something like we're doing, educating and helping people and animals in the future.
Yeah, and it's a very poignant lesson, I think. And how wonderful that you, between you, the two of you, turn that negative into a positive, because it would have been so easy to just retain that anger and, as you say, slag off the vet who missed it, vets generally for not being aware of it. And I think it's fair to say that you met with a bit of resentment, didn't you, from the profession when you started off?
I was treated at first as a loose cannon. And you know that old saying, keep your enemies close? I think everyone was inviting me into the fold because they were a little bit scared of what I was capable of. I had a media background, high profile friends in the media. I could call up certain journalists and say, can I come on ITN tonight and talk? People were scared of me. And so I decided that the best way forward, rather than waving a twig at a tank, was to say, can we all work together? Can we all sit down? And we did, because at the time, DEFRA started a committee on MRSA in animals, and I was the only lay person on that committee. It was made up of mainly, human and animal health professionals and institutions. And I think as we sat down, we began to talk about doing conferences, and academic research would come out, and we would publish that and get together and have annual scientific conferences. And it grew and it grew and it grew. And I look back and I think, it could have gone one way or another. I could have become an angry person, just, a voice in the wilderness. But this way, look what we've managed to achieve with the help and collaboration. And I'm going to say of the BVA and the BSAVA and the BVNA and DEFRA and NOAA, and I'm hoping I can't miss out on anybody else, but all of the people that have helped and supported us, we've all worked together. And that's what it's all about at the end of the day.
Yeah. And it's a tremendous job that you've done. Back when it happened, 2004, 2003, 2004, of course, everyone knew the existence of MRSA, and I think it's fair to say that us vets were feeling rather smug, thinking, thank goodness we haven't got that in our pairs yet. Here, just give this another jolt of penicillin, would you? Because I'm absolutely safe. And so it was.
I was going to say that was it, really. You know, people, it wasn't on their radar, and prudent use of antimicrobials and even simple infection control, biosecurity wasn't being talked about as much as it is now. It was still fairly new.
Yes. Yeah. And you mentioned the doctor going in as we're going out and coming in with protective gear on. Again, that's a sea change, really, isn't it, in terms of how wounds are treated. I hold my hands up before reading about Bella. I don't think I ever treated a cat abscess with gloves on. It was almost a sign of weakness as a vet. You don't wear gloves. Pretty getting your hands dirty.
Yeah, Chris, you've talked about that in the past.
Yeah.
I mean, we fought with that, didn't we? We fought at the beginning to try to get people to think about infection control. And it was a battle about changing culture, changing perceptions. But somehow, where would you say we turned a corner? I mean, it was probably around 2009 when we began to work in the One Health Forum, and we did the One Health Conference, and we looked at human and animal health and the transmission of diseases that can go between zoonosis, between humans and animals. That's when it turned a corner, I think.
Yeah, and I think there were national things picking up, wasn't there? There was the O'Neill report and the formation of rumour, and all of those things. But it's, I mean, back when I left practice in 1998, and even then I was not giving routine post-operative antibiotics. There are still people doing that now. Give it a dose of amoxicillin LA when you spay your bitch, and you just despair. And if I knew better in 1998, and I'm not the fastest learner, you'd think by 2021 the profession would generally have twigged that things like that are not on.
And can we list the support here to deal with analgesia by any chance? And post-operative analgesia?
Well, I think, the difference with that, Mike, is that a product was licensed and pushed hard, and there was such a strong commercial driver behind that, not an animal welfare driver. Animal welfare driver was the beneficiary, obviously,
right? But
it was a huge commercial push.
Was it really?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Tell us more about that, Chris.
I can't remember what the first. Can you remember, Julian, what the first drug was?
It was it Xenocarb, or before that there was Finidine, wasn't there, that came out?
It was after Finidine, because Finidine had with the potential side effects. But
yes, but the Carprofen one came out. I think it was Xenocarb, the first one.
No, it was the injectable analgesics. The reasonably long-acting, the non-steroidals, basically.
Yeah.
Once the injectables of those came out and they started pushing them and making the case that actually for welfare you should be giving post-operative analgesia, and oh, by the way, it was good for animal welfare as well. That was the push.
Where are they today?
Well, does anybody castrate a cat now without giving post-operative analgesia?
Yep.
Yeah, I guess they probably do.
Sadly, some do. Yeah.
Before lockdown, I was in a case where the bitch spay received beautiful level of analgesia right through from pre-op all the way through and post, and the castrate would be sent home with non-steroidals if he needed them.
Mm. Sadly, the last time I had a bitch spayed, which was 16 years ago, I had to go and ask for post-op Metacam. Yeah. And the difference was she was sent home without it.
Yep.
My wife picked her up rather than me.
Mm-hmm.
And probably being me, I'd been away working during the week. I came home on the Friday night and said, why is Maggie licking at her stitches?
Mm-hmm.
What's she having? She's not having anything. So I was in the practice on Saturday morning saying, I want some Metacam. Put her on Metacam. Within 12 hours, she'd stop licking.
Yeah.
Now, when I first qualified, so that was in '96. I think we gave out buster collars. You know, those big plastic collars, stop dogs, make them look like lampshades.
Yeah.
Yeah. We gave those out for pretty much every op, and I realised a few years back that we hardly ever had them. They were getting dusty in the cupboard, and the big change was our routine use of analgesia, and usually we're using polypharmacy. We're using multiple types of analgesia to block every part of the cascade that we can. Now, infection is a big part of pain control, and so if we can keep wounds aseptic, then we don't get many of the irritations in those wounds that then lead to self-trauma, and often then lead to secondary infection. So analgesia is all tied in really with MRSA control, with antibiotic control. Yeah.
I would say, actually, we've seen a lot less MRSA over the past 5 or 6 years, and it's been more MRSP and other resistant infections. But I mean, I can't remember. We get a lot of inquiries, all the time, but MRSA seems to be fading into the background. Would you agree, Chris?
Yeah, I think the whole scene is moving on now that this last year has raised the profile of hygiene and prevention way above what it was ever going to be in any other way. The challenge now is to keep it on the front papers.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because God forbid we don't have a third wave, but as it gradually drifts away, the focus will go. You're not going to get the first 5 pages on coronavirus in the newspapers as you do.
Yeah.
And it's going to be something on page 14, a 1-inch paragraph. I did a RSM, Royal Society of Medicine webinar with Chris Whitty the other day, Chief Medical Officer.
Yes.
And he was saying that actually you have to put all these things in perspective. I think he said 3 years ago, 25,000 people died of flu, but it never got in the papers, although the data was released and everybody knew it was happening. It was just flu, and it was just a bad year for flu. So there's so much perspective in all of this and how you relate one thing to another. But keeping it in the front of mind, keeping hygiene, biosecurity, all that stuff in people's minds is going to be difficult, I think.
Particularly for the general public, because now the questions that I'm getting are about transfer of COVID between humans and animals. And we've updated the website. We've got all the information written by Dr. Tim Nuttall on that. But people are scared. Questions are, should I let somebody touch or stroke my dog in the park? Should I let, relatives touch my cat or dog? There's a lot of fear around it. And what we say to people is that, basic sensible hand hygiene and infection control is important, because we know from past experience that basic good hand hygiene prevents the spread of so many things, including the common cold and flu. So
yes.
We've been banging on about hand hygiene for 10 years and everyone thought it was the most boring topic. Now it seems that we were a little bit ahead of our time in that way. But, our challenge now going forward as a charity coming out of this terrible time that we've had is, like Chris is saying, to reinforce infection control and hand hygiene, prudent use of antimicrobials, and encourage people to think about being, well-being for people and for pets, and how we can all play our part in preventing the spread of any kind of disease with the things we know we can do.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And you talk about responsible use of antimicrobials, and that's key to it, because we are not only are we getting these awful bugs, so-called superbugs that can't be treated by conventional antibiotics, but we're also losing a lot of our routine antibiotics to other, perhaps less super resistant bacteria, and some of those antibiotics will be lost forever, or at least for several generations, until whatever imparted that resistance hopefully has been lost. I was trying to look earlier about how antibiotics have helped us, because clearly, they have saved lives. And so I Googled how many lives have antibiotics saved, and obviously that's impossible to calculate. But in the Second World War, it was thought that, because antibiotics came out just at the end of the Second World War, it was thought they probably saved somewhere in the region of 200,000 lives. The paper I read was quick to add Allied lives, because obviously they were the only ones that mattered at the time. Multiplying that up, there are estimates of somewhere between 30 and 130 million people whose lives have been saved with antibiotics since then. Now, it would be awful to think that going forward, 130 million lives will be lost because we were careless with antibiotics at this stage. And I think, Chris, you mentioned putting things in perspective, and the number of people dying of influenza as opposed to the number of people dying of coronavirus. And obviously, they're not equable, because coronavirus is an emerging virus, and we need to therefore try and get on top and control it. But if we get some sort of relativity on those figures, the number of lives that could be lost because we've been careless with antibiotics, and most importantly, Jill, as you say, because proper hand hygiene and general wound hygiene isn't being adhered to, could be in the order of hundreds of millions of people over the next 40 or 50 years, which is just dreadful, isn't it?
But it's not just lives lost, it's the ones that end up crippled or amputated limbs or whatever else. I mean, I think one of the things I do in Oxford Cathedral, there's a book of remembrance for soldiers killed in war. And every other first Saturday of the month, we read 5 names from the First War, 5 from the Second, as a little service. And if you look at the date of death as opposed to the date they were wounded, some of these guys took 2 years to die.
Right.
Yeah.
And most of those will be dying of things like gangrene. Virtually all of them secondary infections from wounds.
Yeah. And they would have been in dreadful pain for the entirety of those 2 years. You hear of them having sequential amputations.
But they're the ones that died. Then they're all the ones that recovered as well. And you think of the suffering there, both animals and humans, if you didn't have effective antibiotics. And I think, partly, I mean, there's all this stuff about the critical antibiotics and all the rest of that. To a certain extent, we're our own worst enemies because we have the cascade, and the cascade sometimes points you towards using an antibiotic that actually may be convenient, but is not necessarily the one that you should be using.
Sure.
And
sorry, Chris, could I just ask you, obviously a lot of the people who are listening to this podcast won't know what the cascade is. So can you encapsulate that?
Right, sort of 50. Okay, well, essentially the cascade says that if you're going to use a drug, any drug, you have to use it in the species for which it was intended, for the use for which it was intended. And that if there isn't an appropriate appropriate antibiotic for the right species, but the same use in a different species, you can use that, or for different uses in the same species. So because of the licensing rules, it forces you to use some antibiotics that actually you might prefer not to use because there is another less critical alternative, but it's not licensed for that species for that use. At one stage, I think cat abscesses were something silly like amoxicillin was not licensed for cat abscesses, if I remember, years and years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. We used to have to use it off license and just hope that we were we're okay with it. Although a lot of cat abscesses, of course, don't need antibiotics.
No, there's a lot of discussion about that. Cat abscesses are not all the same. An awful lot of cat abscesses are actually largely cellulitis, and there is nothing to lance. And my experience and practice, actually, I think more of them are cellulitis than they are abscesses. So there isn't something that you can slice open and let all the pus out because there is nowhere for it to come out of. So I don't think it's quite as simple as it's made out to be by some of the experts. I think practitioners would beg to differ with somebody who works at the university, may not see quite as many cat abscesses as a practitioner does.
Well, that's because the practitioners are dealing with all of them.
Yeah.
So,
and there's very little more satisfying than popping a blade into an abscess and just watching it.
There's a lot.
You really need to watch more television.
Yeah, we want to watch some TV and come off those YouTube videos, Julian. There's far too many of that. We've touched on this. We've discussed it tonight as well. We've been talking about One Health. We've been talking about antibiotics. We've been talking about Bella Moss Foundation. We've had COVID come into the whole mix now. What do you see as the challenges for Bella Moss moving forwards?
It's a good question, because we have a meeting on Saturday to discuss that very topic.
Could I table the motion that you discuss what's for Bella Moss moving forwards, please?
Well, the exciting thing about Bella Moss moving forward is it isn't just Chris and I, because, mostly you can't do it with just two people. We brought on a new board, a management board. We've got our clinical advisors. We've brought on some very dynamic new people. Mm-hmm. And we're having a meeting on Saturday, because I think we are broadening out now. It is more about One Health. It is more about preventing the spread of diseases between humans and animals. It started off much more about resistant bacteria. It started off as PEPs and MRSA. Look how it's grown and grown and grown. And now more than ever, I think the time is right. We are a unique charity. We do not do anything else for education, and we address really education for pet owners and for the veterinary profession and for human health professionals. So we've got a lot of work ahead of us. We're going to be updating our infection control guidelines this summer for veterinary practices, continuing webinar and online CPD and infection control. We've got the self-audit app, which we're promoting and re-promoting. But more importantly, because I think the vet profession know more or less what they're doing, our work is cut out the general public. Because general public, and I talk about pet owners, rescue centres, animal shelters, groomers, breeders, anyone dealing with animals needs to be more aware about infection control. More now than ever.
Right.
Yeah. And across species, yes, we're going to say, and the risk of transferring those from the owner to the pet and back again.
But without scaremongering, without evoking panic, because that's not what we're about. We're about general education and responsible pet care and ownership and compliance and working with your vet. The last thing we want. I mean, I'm flooded by phone calls about COVID at the moment, and I have to say to people all the time, you need to put this into perspective, because many pet owners actually ring me up and say, my animal has an infection. Do I need to clean continuously around my house? How much disinfectant do I need? Should I take the curtains down? What about behind the radiators? They get a little bit panicked about the whole thing. So our role in going forward in the future is to explain these things to the general public in a way that is manageable and helps to alleviate some of the fear.
I wonder if we could help you with that.
Oh, yes, please. Any help would be welcome.
Well, Julian's just sort of tipped me a wink there, and we've got a section on Veterinary Ramblings called 60 Seconds CPD.
So Jill, would you be prepared then to give us 60 seconds of CPD on what a client should expect when they go to the vet as regards antibiotics?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Fantastic. Okay, let me get the clock ready then. So we've got the clock ready. So this is Jill Moss from the Bella Moss Foundation talking about antimicrobials, antibiotics, what to expect when you go to the vet with your pet. Take it away, Jill.
So we know that animals that are healthy and not susceptible to becoming ill, we want to keep them that way. So what we suggest is, if your animal does become ill, go to the vet, but make sure that you get the right drug for the right bugs. So cultures are really important, and you can find out what bacteria is present. Don't demand antibiotics if they're not necessary. If your vet says no, then listen to your vet. If your vet does prescribe antibiotics, make sure you take the whole course and don't finish it halfway through. Antibiotics need to be completed. But at the end of the day, you want to get the right drug for the right bug and keep your animals healthy by not over-prescribing antibiotics and not asking for them when they're not necessary.
We've got time
Great
for questions.
question time. So what you're talking there, Jill, is about compliance and concordance, aren't you? So clients need to know that if they're given a course of antibiotics, they need to be able to give it to their pet, and they need to be able to give it to their pet for the entire length of the course.
Yes.
We're out. That was fantastic.
There we
60
go.
seconds. That was done brilliant. Thank you so much. That was 60 seconds of CPD with question times.
Wow.
Brilliant.
And that's
Thank
the first time we've ever had question time in a 60-second CPD as well.
It is. That's amazing.
Oh,
But actually, it does highlight a problem, doesn't it? Because quite often clients will come to me and say the ear infection's back, and I'll say, you know, what ear infection? The one he had 3 years ago. Yes. Okay, well, we need to get a culture. Okay.
Yeah.
I did give someone a little pink antibiotics that you gave him last time. I had a few left.
Yes, I hear this a lot. I hear it. I'm on the phone a lot with owners that are more or less dragging things out of the cupboard that have been there for a few years and not necessarily prescribed for their actual pet. It's a little bit of worry. Yeah,
it is. But sometimes you drill down and say, you know, why didn't you finish the course? And actually, the reason is usually either it got better, so I thought it didn't need it, even though in your mind you think, well, I think I drummed in that they should finish it even if it gets better. Yeah. But also, the ones I have some sympathy for are, it was so difficult to give it that in the end, I just couldn't bear to give it for the entire course.
That is a real problem. There is there is an issue. I mean, you know, every pet is different. Every species is different. You're not always going to get the antibiotic in easily. But, you know, that I think owners have to understand that somehow or another, unless the animal is so ill and not eating, then it's very difficult.
This is where International Cat Care have come in with their easy to give stuff as well.
Yes.
Because, you know, cats are a nightmare to dose, aren't they? All cats are a nightmare to dose. And so things that are palatable make life much easier. But you talk about finishing courses. It's interesting. The guidelines have changed a bit on that, haven't they, over the years? It's now give as long as is necessary rather than necessarily a complete course.
It is, and the length of courses have changed as well.
We're going to have to do that 60 seconds again then.
No.
Because I didn't say that.
well, no, you did, because you said give the course that the vet has told you. So the vet is then responsible for saying that there are 10 antibiotic tablets here, which is a 5-day course. If, however, you feel that the pet is well enough at the end of 3 days, bring it back. Yeah, we'll have a look and we'll discuss together.
That's why
what the next stage is.
Transparency is so important, and I think the relationship that you build up between a client and a vet is very important. If you've got that open communication, then that's the best you can have for a pet's health at the end of the day.
It is, and I'm afraid cost ruins that sometimes. And I say that as a commercial vet, cost does ruin it sometimes, because we want the pets to get better, and the only way to be sure of that is to have the client coming back in, but they know full well that we're going to charge them, and there's got to be, I think, some leniency there in the veterinary profession to say, well, okay, we need to get your cat better or your dog better, we need to see it, and we can't be charging you for absolutely everything. And I'm going to get in trouble with my employers for saying that, but
well, you've got two different kinds of owners, though, haven't you? You've got the kind of owner that probably treats their animal like a child substitute, like I do. And then you've got another type of owner that may be saying, you know, money is a real issue. But also money is an issue because people aren't working at the moment. People have lost jobs and, you know, you're going to cut back where you can. And you might be tempted to do something that you wouldn't normally do in order to cut back on the finances that could compromise your animal's health. And that's a real worry.
Yeah. I think we should have more all-encompassing charges. So we'll say, look, provided everything goes well, this treatment is going to be X amount of money, for which there will be 2 or maybe 3 consults involved.
Yeah.
And
My
so
dentist
you
does
pay
this.
up front.
When I go into my dentist, and on the wall is a clear structure of what you can expect for exactly how much, and where it might get a bit more expensive. But it's there on the wall just to let you know in advance of any treatment.
Yeah.
I think that the whole issue of charging and welfare and use of antibiotics and so on is an extraordinarily complex issue, isn't it? Because we the veterinary profession, and I'm not very popular for saying this, but we've gone down a line where we have to dot every I and cross every T in terms of diagnosis.
Yeah.
I'm in the Association of Charity Vets for obvious reasons, and what gets pushed in ACV is very much the pragmatic view. You don't need to do every single test in the book to prove a diagnosis. If you've got a presumptive diagnosis and it's reasonable, then treat the animal and save the client quite a lot of money. And you look at how PDSA and RSPCA treat animals. The animals still get better. There isn't a welfare issue there, but actually you look at how they do it and the cost of doing it, and it's significantly different from what you're getting, what's called a gold standard practice.
I hate that term gold standard,
So do I.
because instantly clients think, oh, so I'm doing the wrong thing for my pet then.
Yeah.
I think as long as you pay particular attention to the welfare needs, then you can have a clear and transparent discussion with the client to say, what do you want? These are the options. This is how I prefer to treat it. I'll be honest, this is how I prefer to treat it, but there are other ways of treating it. And let's look at all those and we'll see what we can do.
Yeah, and pre-anaesthetic blood tests and all of that sort of stuff that, where the evidence for it actually having a benefit is very poor. And actually, you'd be probably far better spending the money you spent on the pre-anaesthetic blood test, putting the animal on drip for 2 or 3 hours afterwards.
And boosting the analgesia.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. Jill, I really want to ask you here, because you're obviously you're very passionate about what you do, and I fully understand that. And you're obviously a passionate pet owner.
Yes, I've just rescued a dog actually, so yeah, I'm probably passionate.
I hesitate to use the word because I don't think you will never actually be able to do this. I don't think we ever are able to do this. So I was going to ask you whether you had, but I'm going to use the word, replaced Bella.
Oh my goodness, I replaced Bella. Of course, I had a rescued lab who sadly I lost last June, very suddenly to kidney disease. And now I've got a rescued, I don't know what. It's a 10-year-old dog that was going to be euthanized because nobody wanted her. She's a real mix of everything. I think if you can give an animal love and a home, that's my feeling. Unfortunately, I never got married. It's sad. It's very sad that I never got married and I never had children. But I suppose, my passion in life is animal welfare and helping animals as much as I can.
Yeah, that's brilliant stuff. So is there, you've talked about a lot of stuff and a lot of the work that you've been doing here, both of you, on the Bella Moss Foundation. And when this airs, I'm sure a lot of people are going to be very interested. Is there a central hub or somewhere where people can go to get involved, get information? It's
the Bella Moss Foundation, and it's www.thebellamossfoundation.com. And it's a much better website, and there's a vet section separate to the general public section. And if you are a vet and you want to go there and take a look at our infection control guidelines, and we do have an app that you can download, and the download is all there and easily accessible. There is no charge for anything. Chris, would you like to just mention something about the self-audit app here, because it's your passion as well?
Yeah, practices need to be able to assess how effectively they're doing. So the app allows you to go room by room and answer questions in each room that are relevant to that room. And it then gives you a score at the end of the day, so that you can do the thing routinely, so that you can check that your hygiene, your biosecurity is up to speed and kept up to speed.
Excellent. And that would be useful for the RCVS practice standards, wouldn't it? Sorry for interrupting you.
Well, yes.
Words out of my mouth. I was just about to say, and actually, if you want to prove your biosecurity for practice standards, then you simply keep the downloads, and it can show you the progress from where you were to where you've got to, and that you're maintaining it.
It was designed by Pam Mosdale, who's one of our advisors, who was a long time at RCVS Practice Standards Scheme, and also Dr. Tim Knuckle, and the late Louise O'Dwyer. And I need to get this in. We had a wonderful, wonderful person. Louise O'Dwyer helped us with our infection control guidelines and our audit app, and sadly we lost her about a year ago. But she was a wonderful, wonderful, valued member of the Balamos Foundation.
Oh.
Very, very sadly missed. Louise.
Yeah,
the resources on your website, I have to say, are amazing. There are posters to download, there are charts to download, and standard operating procedures from the practice point of view.
Which are all going to be updated later this year.
Okay, that's excellent. I bet. So if you go through the infection control app and you go through and you say you can download, do you get a certificate at the end?
Not so much a certificate, but actually Practice Standards Scheme have recommended our audit app as a resource, and it would be very hard to issue certificates, but I do think it's very popular because we know lots of people are doing it, and people are going back in to redo it as well. And I think the idea of that is what you can do is have a meeting with all of your staff and discuss what you're doing, and keep repeating it and keep that communication going, which is probably better than a certificate at the end of the day.
No, it's not. We've got a certificate.
Well, those certificates are very good. I've got one here.
Yeah, certificates are great. We've got a certificate. We've
This
received
is
lots of CPD tonight that you can present to the RCVS to go down as your part of your CPD log. What's tonight's
so here we go. Well, tonight's, this is a very special one. It says more than the usual CPD. This certifies that the Belamos Foundation graced our show with their presence and taught us loads. So pay attention. And it's signed Mike and Julian, me and him.
Amazing.
And there's so what do we have? We have a cat bite abscess there. That's the good old fashioned style that you've lanced. And there's a bit of blood there in the shape of a heart. It landed on the table that way. So I took a picture of it.
That's amazing.
There are some poppies, lest we forget how useful antibiotics were. There is a post-operative wound infection, not one of mine, but one that I saw, and clearly on this occasion, aseptic technique had not been carried out. In fact, this was a dog bite that had been sutured closed, something one should never do. And that, of course, is some Burke. It was me actually wearing PPE, which is what we all should be doing.
That's amazing. I love that. I absolutely love that.
And this is great. This is a Nereid worm. No, it's not. It's a sea slug called a sea dragon. A very, very rare and unusual one. And really, I put this in just to highlight that actually a lot of the cases that we're seeing, that we've spoken about tonight, the MRSA and MRSP and things, are very unusual cases. Let's keep them that way. Let's keep them very, very unusual, because what we don't want to do is to say, oh yeah, I've seen hundreds of those.
Absolutely. And I just want to say finally that everyone that gives up their time for the foundation does it out of a goodwill and a good heart. So if you do find our resources useful, do donate if you can, or perhaps have a fundraising day for us at your practice. That would be another lovely thing to do. But the money will go into education. Nobody gets any money, not even me. Chris won't even let me have a penny for anything. But that's what we do. We put all of our energy into free education.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Unfortunately,
absolutely brilliant.
Unfortunately, that's sort of, well, it's unfortunate at this moment because it brings us around to that time of the show, not where we say goodbye, but when Julian gets to tell a joke. I'm sorry.
Is it going to be a bug joke?
Well, we'll find out.
It's not going to be a bug joke. I was going to do a bug joke, but unfortunately, all the bug jokes I had are X-rated, so I couldn't. I couldn't think.
How do
I
you
couldn't
get
think
an
of
X-rated bug?
Believe me, we have them. However, we're recording this on the 14th of April. It's going to go out in a lot later than that. It takes about 8 or so weeks to come out. But on the 15th of April, 1984, we lost, to my mind, one of Britain's greatest comedians. That was Tommy Cooper.
Oh yeah.
And so I've got a Tommy Cooper joke that I love. I mean, they're all silly, aren't they? I want to say Tommy Cooper. But this is about a pools winner who thinks, I won the pools. That's fantastic. I won the pools. I'm gonna buy a car. So he goes into this car showroom and says, I won the pools. I want to buy a car. And the man says, okay, well, here we go. This is a Jaguar. This is so the prices are equivalent to 1984 prices. This is top of the range at £8,000. He said, oh, well, I didn't win that much. He said, didn't you know? I won a bit less. He said, well, okay, I've got a Triumph Herald here. This is 500. No, I didn't win that much. He said, well, I've got a bike here, motorbike, 250. No, I didn't win that much, I'm afraid. Well, I've got a push bike here, it's £50. No, I didn't win that much. He said, well, what did you win? He said, I won £10. He said, well, we got one of the old children's toys, the hoop and the stick. It's a tenner. Do you want that? He said, yeah, I have that. That's great. So he gets this little hoop and the stick and starts beating the hoop with a stick and gets a good old pace up. And he's walking for hours with this thing, gets into the country, feeling a bit tired and thirsty. He stops by a country pub and leaves his hoop and stick outside and goes in and has a drink. A little while later, he comes out feeling quite replete and his stick's been stolen. And he goes back and he says to the barman, my stick's been stolen. He said, sorry? My stick on a hoop and stick and the stick's been stolen. So I'm sorry, nothing we can do about it, but I'm sure you can replace it. I don't think it doesn't look very expensive. So I'm not worried about the expense, but how am I going to get home?
just like that. Just like that.
Tommy Cooper. Oh my goodness. Well, yeah, I my father's favourite comedian, actually. Yeah, he was gem, wasn't he? Really gem, and
he was fantastic.
Very well told.
Yeah. Well, thank you. But Mike hasn't got it yet. He has got it. He's just not bothered. He's frankly not bothered by it.
Oh dear. Yes, fair enough.
And on that bombshell.
If I could say on behalf of Veterinary Ramblings, Jill Moss, Chris Laurence, thank you very, very much for giving up your time for us tonight and for making it such an entertaining evening. Very much appreciated. And don't forget, if you like what you've heard or like what you've seen, don't forget to click like, share, tell your friends. You can also register and get updates on a regular basis. We're out on Facebook, Spotify, YouTube, iTunes, any of your regular podcast series or producers. And get in touch. Let us know. If you want us to cover something, get in touch with us and we'll do our best to cover it. And on that note, Chris Laurence and Jill Moss, if I could raise a glass to you and say thank you very much indeed. May your dog go with you.
May your dog go with you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's
Cheers.
been very entertaining.
Thank you. Cheers.
Cut.
I've no idea how we limited it to just over an hour. I could have gone on chatting to you both for days.
It was a real pleasure, and thank you for the opportunity, because what we do is not very sexy, so it's quite hard to find a fun element to what we do. But thank you for the opportunity.
Well, no, honestly, the debt is all ours. Thank you so much for coming on. It's the work you do is absolutely immeasurably important. So please carry on doing it, and hopefully our show will give you a little bit more advertising.
Well, do you know what? I do think you're onto something, definitely, because, you know, the great thing about this kind of communication that you've got is it's not a lecture, it's not passive listening, it's a live conversation. And, you know, you're entertained as well as informed. And it's a great balance to read.
Well, I'm a firm believer in that humour is cross-training for the mind. So if you just hear dry facts, you may retain them, depends on what mind you have. But if there's some sort of humour or lightheartedness associated with that, you'll remember it better.
It's Julian's jokes they listen for. It's nothing else.
Well, but I suspected as much, Chris. It's good of you to say that, but someone says not.
Yeah, you're probably right, Chris. Yeah, yeah, you're probably right there.